Why your feelings learned to stay quiet. There was a moment, long before you knew how to name it, when you realized it was safer not to speak. Not because anyone told you to be silent, but because something in the room shifted when you tried. Maybe it was a look that lingered half a second too long, a sigh that carried weight, a conversation that kept going even after you entered it. So you adjusted, not dramatically, quietly. You learned how to stay present without taking up space, how to feel something without showing it, how to sense the emotional temperature of a room and lower yourself accordingly. At the time, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like intelligence, like awareness, like knowing how things worked. You still showed up. You still cared. You still felt deeply. You just learned to do it inwardly. Over time, this became so natural that you stopped noticing it. You weren't suppressing your feelings. You were translating them into something more acceptable, something easier to carry, something less likely to disrupt what mattered to you: connection, safety, belonging. There are moments now when your body reacts before your mind does. A tightening in your chest when a conversation turns uncertain. A pause before you answer a simple question, as if you're checking whether your response will land safely. A subtle holding of breath when attention moves toward you. These aren't flaws. They're echoes. You learned early on that emotions were powerful, not in the way movies show, but in the way they could shift moods, change dynamics, or create distance. So you became observant. You learned when to soften your voice, when to nod instead of speak, when to turn intensity into thoughtfulness. You didn't disappear. You adapted. An adaptation, when it works, becomes invisible. There may have been times when expressing yourself didn't bring relief. It brought misunderstanding, or dismissal, or silence that felt heavier than words. So your system took notes. It noticed what happened when you needed reassurance. It noticed what happened when you were excited, or hurt, or confused. It learned which parts of you were welcomed, and which parts made things complicated. And gradually, without ceremony, you became skilled at holding things in. Not repressing, not denying, just containing. There's a difference. Contained feelings don't vanish. They wait. They shape how you listen, how you respond, how you choose words carefully, sometimes too carefully. You might notice now that when something matters to you, you explain it calmly, even if it feels intense inside. Or that when you're upset, your first instinct is to understand the other person. Or that when something hurts, you tell yourself it's fine before checking whether it actually is. These aren't mistakes. They are strategies that once worked very well. They helped you stay connected. They helped you stay steady. They helped you avoid becoming a problem in environments where emotions weren't handled gently. At some point, though, the strategy stopped being situational and started feeling like identity. You didn't decide to be the calm one, or the reasonable one, or the one who doesn't need much. You grew into it because it felt safer than needing something that might not arrive. There's a kind of quiet pride that can come with this. Being the one others rely on. Being composed. Being thoughtful under pressure. And yet, there may also be moments of confusion. Times when you're asked what you want, and the answer feels strangely out of reach. Moments when you feel deeply moved by something, but struggle to explain why. Or a sense that your inner world is rich and alive, but rarely fully shared. This isn't because you don't feel. It's because you learned how to feel without outward movement. Carl Jung once spoke about how the psyche adapts to protect itself, not through grand decisions, but through quiet adjustments that happen over time. Not as pathology, as survival. When feelings stay quiet long enough, they don't disappear. They become background music, always present, rarely acknowledged. You may notice that silence feels familiar to you, even comforting. That being unseen doesn't always feel like absence. Sometimes it feels like relief. And yet, there's a difference between rest and disappearance. This is where awareness gently enters. Not to change anything, not to undo the past, just to notice. To notice how quickly you minimize yourself in conversation, how often you wait for permission to speak emotionally, how your body relaxes when no one expects anything from you. There's no need to judge this. Judgment would miss the point. These patterns didn't form because you were weak. They formed because you were perceptive. You understood something about the world early on, that emotions influence systems, and systems don't always respond kindly. So you learned to carry yours carefully. Awareness doesn't ask you to suddenly express everything. It doesn't demand vulnerability. It doesn't require you to change your nature. It simply offers choice. Choice to notice when silence is protection and when it's habit. Choice to feel your feelings fully, even if you don't share them. Choice to recognize that quiet doesn't mean absent. There may be moments now where you feel a subtle tension between who you are inside and how you appear. Not conflict, just distance. That distance isn't a problem to solve. It's information. It tells you that something inside you learned to be careful for a reason. And that same part may now be curious about what else is possible. Not louder, not dramatic, just a little more present. You don't need to force expression. You don't need to rewrite yourself. You don't need to become someone new. Sometimes the most meaningful shift is simply allowing your internal experience to exist without immediately managing it. Letting a feeling be felt, even quietly, without shrinking it. Without translating it into something safer. Without rushing to make sense of it for others. Just noticing it as real. This isn't about becoming different. It's about becoming aware of how carefully you've been living. And awareness, when it's gentle, doesn't take anything away. It gives space. Space to breathe. Space to pause. Space to recognize that your feelings didn't go quiet because they weren't important, but because they were. If this reflection resonates, you don't need to do anything with it right now. You can simply let it sit with you. Like a light resting on a familiar room, revealing shapes you've known all along. And if you choose to continue these kinds of reflections slowly, at your own pace, that choice belongs to you. Understanding isn't a destination. It's a soft turning toward yourself. And you're allowed to do that gently.